Well, folks, the Air Force, they've got themselves a brand new fighter jet. It's officially called the F-47, and it's, supposed to take over for the F-22, kind of be the top dog, the tip of the spear when it comes to air power. I'm sure a lot of you saw the unveiling back on March 21st. General David W. Alvin, Air Force Chief of Staff, and President Trump, they were both there for the announcement. And General Alvin, he didn't beat around the bush. He called the F-47, quote, truly the world's first crewed sixth-generation fighter. Now, this is pretty significant when you consider, what we're seeing from countries like China. I mean, they're making some big leaps in stealth technology themselves. So this announcement, it's not just, some random thing. It's a big deal. And the F-47, it's not going to be up there all alone. It's going to be part of a whole fleet of sixth-generation aircraft working alongside the B-21 bomber, And what's really interesting about these two, the F-47 and B-21, is they're both built around, some of the same core ideas, next-generation stealth, of course. That also sensor fusion, which basically means they can take data from a bunch of different sources and, put it all together to get a really quick picture of what's going on. And then you've got the ability to hit targets way out there, long-range strikes, even in places where the enemy's got through pretty sophisticated defenses. So what exactly makes this F-47 a step up from what we've got now? Well, one of the big things they're talking about is its range. They say it's, quote, significantly longer than the F-22. Now, the F-22 can already fly over 1,850 miles with those external fuel tanks. So when they say significantly longer, we're talking about a real game changer here. And get this, I shouldn't talk about making two different versions of the F-47. Like imagine one that's bigger, built specifically for those huge distances you find in the Pacific, really maximize that range. And then maybe a smaller version, maybe a bit more agile, better suited for the tighter spaces in Europe. So this idea, it kind of points to a modular design philosophy. It's like, the aircraft, it's not just this fixed thing, It can be adapted, upgraded over time to stay ahead of the curve. It's almost like Legos, You can swap out pieces as needed. And this isn't something they just, whipped up overnight. The tech that's going into the F-47, it's been in development and testing for the last 5 years. They've been using these things called X-planes, experimental aircraft. And these X-planes, they'd already racked up hundreds of hours of flight time. Said the engineers, they'd had a chance to really put these cutting-edge ideas through their pieces. Now, it's worth mentioning that former Secretary Frank Kendall, he actually said a while back, I think it was in the mid-2010s, that they already had X-plane prototypes flying around. So this has been a long time coming. And General Alvin, he seems to think that all this early testing, it's really sped up development. And it's also helped them figure out how they're actually going to use the F-47 in real-world operations. Right now, their goal is to get the F-47 up in the air for its first flight sometime before President Trump's term ends in January 2029. Now, if you think about the F-22, it actually took about 6 years, from when they picked the design to when the first production model flew. So this timeline for the F-47, it's pretty ambitious. All right, let's talk money, shall we? Cost the numbers, the nitty-gritty. So they're saying they want the F-47 to not only be more capable, but also, more affordable. They want it to be adaptable, so it can handle whatever threats pop up in the future. And they're planning on buying a lot more F-47s than they did F-22s. In the end, they only got 186 F-22s. Each one of those cost about $140 million just to buy, the fly-alike costs. But when you factor in development and all the other stuff, the tool program costs, it was closer to $350 million per plane. For the F-47, they're aiming for somewhere between 220 and 250 aircraft. Now, they hadn't said exactly how much each F-47 is going to cost, but President Trump, he did say it's a, quote, good-sized plane. And he kind of hinted that if they told us the price right now, it would give away too much information about, how big it is and what kind of technology it's packing. But it's not just about, how it performs in the air and how much it costs up front. They're also really focused on making the F-47 more sustainable, easier to maintain and able to fly more often than our current fifth-generation fighters. This probably means they've made some improvements to the stealth coatings, how durable they are. You see, those stealth coatings on earlier aircraft aided a lot of upkeep, to keep them into top shape. But they're pointing to the B-21 bomber as a good example of a plane that's designed to be, more readily available. They call it a, quote, daily flyer. And that's because they've got those more resilient stealth coatings, and they've really taken the feedback from the maintenance crews to heart when they were designing it. And the whole design philosophy for the F-47 is that it's, quote, built to adapt. So they're using digital design tools and an open systems architecture. Now, open is systems that basically means that the different parts of the aircraft, the hardware and the software, it's all designed to work together more easily. And it also means it's easier to upgrade, add new technologies as they come along. They're also hoping this will mean they need fewer people and less infrastructure to, deploy and maintain your aircraft. Okay, so who's actually building this thing? Well, the contract went to Boeing. Big win for them, beat out Lockheed Martin. This contract, it covers what they call the engineering and manufacturing development phase. So that means Boeing's going to build a few test aircraft, but the contract also includes options for what they call low-rate initial production, which is basically the thing approach they used for the B-21. Boeing, they said that the F-47, it builds on their long history of making fighter jets. Now, the Air Force, at first, they didn't say exactly why they could Boeing, but later on, it came out that, after they did their analysis, they decided that Boeing's proposal offered be, quote, best overall value to the government. Of course, Lockheed Martin, they weren't too happy about the decision. President Trump, he's been a big supporter of the F-47 from the get-go. He's called it, quote, the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. He's also said that they'd had experimental versions flying around in secret for almost 5 years. And according to both President Trump and the Air Force, one of the main reasons they're building this thing is to counter China's growing military power. That initial contract with Boeing, it's estimated to be worth around $20 billion. And General Alvin really emphasized how important this new plane is. He said the F-47 will allow the U.S. to, quote, write the next generation of modern aerial warfare. Now, obviously, a program this big, it's going to attract some scrutiny. People are asking questions about the cost. Is it really worth it? Especially when you think about all the problems they've had with the F-35 program. And then there's the B-21 bomber, which they're developing at the same time, and which is supposed to share some of the same fancy technology as the F-47. So some people are wondering, do we really need all of this? Dan Grazier, he's a military procurement analyst, and he's been pretty skeptical about, continuing to rely on these manned fighter jets, especially with all the advancements we're seeing in drones and, even space warfare. He also had the point with this $20 billion contract. That's probably just the beginning, like seed money. He thinks the total cost of the F-47 program could end up being hundreds of billions of dollars over its lifetime. So what does the thing actually look like? Well, they have released some early pictures, computer renderings of the F-47, and it definitely looks the part, all stealthy, that specially shaped nose and a bubble canopy. And it's got what they call a chiseled cherame, which is basically a sharp angle where the side of the fuselage meets the bottom, and the fuselage itself is pretty flat. Now, here's something interesting. It's also got canards, the little wings near the front. And the main wings, they have this distinctive upward angle. They're saying the F-47 is going to have a whole new level of stealth compared to planes like the F-35, and it should have a much longer range, which means it won't need to refuel in the air as often. And looking ahead, the Air Force, they're already thinking about an unknown version of this thing, as artificial intelligence gets better and better. Oh, and one more thing, the Navy. They're actually running their own competition for their version of the next generation fighter. Northrop Grumman and Boeing, they're the ones battling it out for that contract. So why did they call it the F-47? Well, it's not just during the Ming, It's a tribute to the P-47 Thunderbolt, which was a really famous and successful fighter plane back in World War II. It's also a nod to the year the U.S. Air Force was founded. And of course, it acknowledges the support the program's gotten from the 47th president. Now, here's something you might not know. Back in 2023, the Biden administration, they actually put the whole NGAD program on hold. NGAD, that's the umbrella program that the F-47 falls under. They wanted to take a step back and, really assess whether it was still necessary, considering all the new warfighting technologies that are coming out and the possibility of a conflict with China. But in the end, they decided that NGAD was still a top priority, and they left it up to the Trump administration to decide which company would get the contract. Speaking of which, Boeing's CFO, he recently said that the company's cash flow is getting better, which is, kind of a big deal considering all the trouble they've been having lately. And of course, we can't forget all the scrutiny Boeing's put under because of those quality control problems with their commercial airliners. So the F-47, it's a pretty big deal, folks. If likely to be the backbone of the Air Force's air superiority strategy for quite a while, all those advancements in stealth and its range and the fact that it's designed to be adaptable, all of that makes it really important for, for maintaining air dominance. And that historical connection, with the name F-47, that just adds another layer of, meaning to the whole thing. So the program is for the F-47. It's definitely going to play a major role in shaping the future of air combat. Before we go, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time.